last but not, I guess I don't know why I keep saying last but not least when I'm in the last one. I guess the last one here.
Truly humble.
Yeah, I apologize. Is going to be here. Firefighter Daigo. See this. So Firefighter Daigo, Rescuer in Orange, or Megumi no Daigo, Kyukoku no Orange. So what this is like you might, how do I say this? It might be a little bit confusing to people once they go down the my anime list kind of rabbit hole and or anime news network rabbit hole. But essentially, there is an original series called how do I say this? So there's a general series called kind of Firefighter Daigo, Fire Company M, Megumi Daigo. Also had like an anime about it that was called Megumi no Daigo Kajiba no Bakayaro or whatever. So Daigo Fire Company, which involved this original kind of like inspiring firefighter, legendary a firefighter that becoming a legend called Asahina Daigo. Now, um, Firefighter Daigo Rescue in Orange is an adaptation, anime adaptation of the sequel of that manga, where there is like another Daigo that works alongside his companions and stuff like that to put out fires. So this is a sequel to the original manga, and the original manga was a sort of like a cult hit, and it now got a sequel as well as these sorts of anime adaptations. And I believe it also has live action, if I remember correctly, and they were all quite popular at the time. So anyways, this anime adaptation, again, Firefighter Daigo, Rescue in Orange, Megumi no Daiko Q Koku no Orange, uh, sequel, anime adaptation of the sequel is done by Brainsbase. So you guys, they're a very, very, very long time studio. They've done everything I want to say from like, what is it? Just like Akikan to like, uh, yeah, they've done a crap ton of stuff. Yeah, they've done everything from like Akikan to like Spice and Wolf season 2 to Your Eternity, just like a lot of stuff. So long time um studio, and the staff is essentially uh, Murata Masahiko, director Murata Masahiko, and the duo of him as well as Fujita Shinzo, both uh, pretty decent veterans in the industry. I would say probably um, Murata is a little bit more experienced than Fujita is, but both of them were involved in a couple of brains-based stuff. I think To Your Eternity, as well as one other stuff. I want to say like Mazin Kaiser or whatever it was. And so they've essentially taken their To Your Eternity team and some other people in Brains Base and some of the subcontractors that they're working with for this team, and they've clumped them together to create this Firefighter Daigo's adaptation. So pretty consistent team that they had so far. Again, veterans from the previous teams as well as from Brains Base To Your Eternity team, which was pretty successful, pretty good quality as it is. They also have hired, I want to say, a pretty solid line of voice actresses. Say they have Sakura Ayane as sort of the one of the main heroines, or the one of the, I want to say, female deuteragonists in Nakamura Yuki. They have Enoki Junya as the titular Toaki Daigo, and Yashiro Taku as sort of the main sort of almost second person Watson like persona, the main sort of like get him, get her, get it done kind of do-gooder character who's hardworking, Onoda Shun, and he's being voiced by Yashiro Taku, and obviously a lot of the A-listers, veterans of the industry coming up, Konishi Katsuyuki, Inoue Marina, what is it? Um, yeah, Takeuchi Shunsuke, Quest Takeito, uh, Tetsu, stuff like that. Nakamura Yuichi, a lot of the names that you'll hear around these parts. So pretty solid I want to say staff and Seiyu list all around, rounding up a pretty, I guess, good start to the series. The opening and ending for the visual, or sorry, the audio part of the audio visuals is pretty standard. I would. The opening is Anthropos by Kanjani, and the ending theme is Perfect World by LMYK. And I the opening is a pretty standard kind of J rock male vocals kind of thing. It wasn't that impressive in my opinion. The ending was, the standard sort of quiet ED. I like the ending a little bit more than the OP on average compared to, the other openings and the other endings out there. But both of them were pretty standard, I would say. The BGM overall is pretty well done and not too intrusive, but it's definitely like it kind of adds a proper vibe to the atmosphere. It almost kind of felt like, you know, something like the Chiaihuru OST, where it kind of just added a very good kind of timbre to the scenes. The visuals themselves, of course, are fine. Again, the brain space to your eternity team kind of pulling it in pretty well. It does try to stick to the original character designs that are kind of reflected in the older times in the older manga art style a little bit more. So you can kind of see that those faces, those thicker eyebrows, those lines, those eyes, and like the hairstyle kind of stuff a little bit more in the anime. But it is portrayed pretty well alongside kind of more modern designs. And the 3D parts of it are blended quite well in and only kind of really obvious when they're messing around with the vehicles. But again, that's pretty par for the course these days. So yeah, pretty solid audio visuals, pretty solid staff here, I want to say. Let me get to the summary real quick here. So if I'm just going to read the synopsis real quick. So the story of how three yeah, the story of how three young firefighters destined to save Japan grow in spirit. Takedaigo burns with remarkable talent and unparalleled determination. Onoda Shun struggles against the walls blocking his own path. Nakamura Yuki hopes to become one of the few female members of the Special Rescue Corps known as Orange. When these three young firefighters who share the goal of becoming members of Orange come together, the story of how Japan will one day be saved begins. And what looms before them is a crisis that endangers the entire country. So, this story is essentially a mixture of
Yeah, when does the fire
the
giant show up?
yeah, exactly. The Shaman King's spirit of fire, flame or
Yeah,
spirit
where's
of
the
fire. Yeah,
spirit of
he
like the
just showed.
fucking what was it? What was the fire? The like infamous fire during like feudal times or whatever. Was it Tokyo? Was it like the
Oh
Tokyo
yeah,
fire? They like fucking
yeah.
decimated
No, no, no.
everything because
That
it's like
was yeah,
everything was wood and
yeah,
paper.
yeah. I know what you're talking about, but
Yeah. When does the
that'll
spirit
be
of
yeah,
that come back to attack? What's going on?
yeah, exactly. um, so this story is split between sort of the character growth um aspects of the three main characters. Again, Nakamura Yuki, who is the female member who wants to become, the female firefighter and kind of, you know, has her own very strong motivations that are revealed later in the series, where she as to why she becomes wants to become a firefighter. Onoda Shun again taking on sort of the main character, but also sort of the Watson-like second person chronicler role in this series, where he's kind of doing his own thing. He works really hard to get where he is. Um, but obviously there are other people that are really good beside him, like Takedaigo. And, he he's kind of coming up against hurdles where he's meeting up against talents and meeting up against challenges where he can't just get through them by his kind of get her done nature or whatever. And obviously Daigo himself, who is like a genius and stuff like that, but has his own sort of uh unorthodox methods to help out the people who need to be rescued, and has his own sort of like, I guess, his own inner story and past and stuff like that. So it is interesting that how the main focus does still shift to Ono the Shun instead of sort of Toaki Daigo as is sort of the title of the series. But Ono the Shun, the sort of get it done guy, is still sort of ultimately the chronicler, even though a lot of the events sort of do center around his solo like introspections and his own kind of life and his career or whatever as he becomes a firefighter. So it is kind of interesting in that aspect. And the other half, or I don't want to say half, but the other sort of element that is sort of the main part of the story is obviously the three characters going through uh, firefighter related incidents and training and stuff like that. So a lot of the episodes so far are related to, or at least half of the episodes right now. There's 7 episodes out as of this podcast recording. At least half of it, I want to say, so at least 3 episodes. I want to say. I think the initial incident, like the real life incident, starts at episode 5 or so. Um, So at least 3 or 4 episodes are based around them just training and setting up the initial character lore and stuff like that. So the reason why I was hesitant is so well, first off, I'll explain the basic asset elements of this facet. So when I say the firefighter training and the incidents and stuff like that, they go like this when they do the firefighter training, when they talk about like firefighter related drills or do the real life like firefighter stuff, they go into a lot of freaking detail. Just like anywhere from the equipment to like what they have to do to like their speech, like what they're like the signals they have to give, the stuff they have to say, stuff like that. Um, it's clear that obviously um, the author and the related writers have done their research, and they even have a um, what is it narrator, uh, who is Tsuda Kenjiro, who is the voice actor for the narrator, kind of explaining additional stuff in the background, like, oh, firefighters have to go through this training or whatever, blah blah, blah, while like this sort of montage goes on in the background, like, hey, firefighters have to train for 5 weeks in this special class, in these special classes, learning about these things, blah blah, or firefighters have to do XYZ to ensure that this happens, stuff like that. And so that goes into a lot of detail. So that's a lot of trivia and that's a lot of just like hot, sweaty firefighter action that's going on in these sorts of scenes. So that's the other part. Now, how the balance works out is actually quite interesting. So being sort of an anime based around these sorts of characters, right? Like the three characters that have their own reasons for becoming firefighters and growing up to, become legendary firefighters or good firefighters, whatever, right? Because that's sort of the premise of the anime and how that develops, and it has to be sort of an exciting anime in that aspect, right? This is a very obvious, like all the nose dramatization of how firefighters, right, become the people that they are and do the things that they do. And obviously, there's a lot of very cheesy lines like, "Oh, like, are you oh, it's the goddess of," or it's like, "Oh, like, have you been blessed by the god of rescue," or whatever. It's like, and every time you train, guys gotta put your back into it. So, you guys are blessed by the spirit of rescue, or, like all these very cheesy
What is
lines,
the
right?
spirit of rescue?
Morning rescue.
Don't ask
Oh
me.
yeah.
Yeah, morning rescue. Yeah. So what I so two so you might think like, oh, I'm describing this and it's becoming very cheesy, like, oh, they're talking about the spirit of rescue being blessed by the god of rescue. Oh, you guys got to put your backs into it so you can guys can become the greatest rescue squad of all time. And all these very cheesy lines. But there are two caveats that really dull the edge and prevent it from becoming too cheesy. And one caveat is that there's the character lore and like background setups in themselves are not that extreme. So it's like when you hear about the girl Nakano Yuki's like background and why she wants to become a firefighter, stuff like that, you think to yourself, oh, like okay, that's like reasonable as to why she might want to become a firefighter. Like that could presumably happen in real life,
Are you
and
saying the
obviously,
character backstories aren't like my entire family was exploded by a fire monster,
yeah,
and
exactly.
therefore I will become a firefighter?
Yeah, exactly. I saw a firefighter like just passing by me at a mall once, and I just instantly wanted to become a
Yeah,
firefighter.
also,
Yeah.
Uh,
which one of these characters is the firefighter that's committing the arsons? Hmm?
yeah, exactly. The
You gotta have one of
spy.
those. Yeah, which one
Yeah,
is the
exactly.
traitor?
Yeah, yeah.
How is
So
this related to Fire Force?
yeah, it's actually in the same universe. I don't, this is the prequel. Yeah, because before the fire becomes sentient, but like her, Onoda Shun, and I would say probably the least realistic of it is might be Daigo, but it's like all of them have relatively realistic character lore and background setups, which kind of help dull the edge of the cheesy lines, right? And the other sort of caveat is that the way the pacing and the amount of material that is provided across like each arc and across the pages and the chapters and the minutes and stuff like that in the series is that it's like 80, like I want to say 70 to 90%, 80% on average, just the firefighter like action scenes. It's just like firefighter action, like get in there, save the person. Oh, their arm is caught. Do this. Oh, this wall is about to crash. Do that. Um, they're trapped in this building. They can't. The door is like locked. They have to find some other stuff. They have to find another exit, and then they use their ingenuity to help save the person in trouble while getting themselves out, stuff like that. And there's a lot of that action going on. And obviously, Sudaken, as a narrator, explaining that and all this other trivia. And that, again, I think dulls the sort of cheesiness of the lines going on because the focus is not on the characters and how they're like, oh, I must become the greatest firefighter of all time. There's not really that much of
I must
that to begin with.
destroy fire.
The fire, yeah, exactly. I must make sure all fire is gone from this earth. And that was sort of the fear we had during the previews, right?
Yeah.
Where we were afraid
I
of
mean, my
that it
fear
would
was also that like it would be
show a training montage.
the exact opposite, right? Where it was
Yeah, yeah,
literally just
exactly.
training, 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 training,
Yeah.
and then
Training and
like
like introspection of the
yeah,
characters.
and
Yeah.
then at like the very end, it's like here's a
By
fire.
the way, yeah.
Yeah.
Here, fire. Yeah, exactly. So I think that's a very good balance that it struck. And I'm really glad that that happened because, again, as Near said, and as we were talking about during the previews, if this series had been just training plus, character inspection, being like, will I ever become the firefighter that I was meant to be? If it
Will I
was
ever
just like
become
18.
a fire?
Yeah. Just the fire, yeah, just the fire monster. He just like bursts into the flames in the
Man,
middle of the
sometimes you gotta
office.
become the enemy
You've become what
to
you've
defeat
sworn to
the enemy.
destroy.
Yeah. Yeah.
This really
God,
should
you
like of
know
a
that
fire
that's gonna
force.
happen.
This should be like this really should just be like the start, the first person.
Yeah, exactly. The prequel, yeah,
First
exactly.
person to turn
Before the fire
at the
monsters.
end.
Yeah. But I do think it had a very good balance because it helped cut down on the dramatization by being like, hey, guys, we actually have all these firefighting scenes and this firefighter trivia, and like they're doing firefighter things, and it's not just them running around a field and track like a racing track being like every day I train, I become a better firefighter. It's not like that. Most of it's about like the firefighter stuff, which is very nice. And I think overall it creates a very nice balance. And that coupled with how the characters are lined up pretty well in terms of their lore and background settings really makes for a surprisingly decent series. And I knew that there were positive reviews about this franchise in general. I know a lot of people did like the story of both the original as well as sort of this newer sequel. And re- even despite that, I still had a little bit of trepidation going on into this anime adaptation, but I'm glad it turned out this way. So I do think it's struck a nice balance. It hasn't gotten to the looming calamity part yet, but it's pretty obvious that it's going to be like some arson that they're going to have to fight against or some whatever it is. Just from the synopsis itself, right? But I am definitely looking forward to it. I do think it strikes a very nice balance, and I'm definitely looking forward to it. I just think it did this very well, and I think more shows, more writing, more like manga and like other animation related media in general should honestly take this sort of route more if they want to do something that's a little bit more cheesy and dramatic and pair it up with some sort of like X theme, like firefighting or whatever. I think instead of because a lot of series out there do kind of go the route that Nier and I mentioned about too much introspection, too much just the guy running around the track field just thinking about how he wants to become the best, X he can ever be, right? Um and I just don't think that's very good because it takes too much away from the actual unique parts of the series, the which is a theme, right? The unique part of a series that gives it a lot of the value in those sorts of series is not really the character interactions, to be honest. It's the theme. It's how the characters play around the theme, how the characters uh respond to them being in swimming competitions or go competitions or doing firefighter stuff or being a police or being in the manga industry or whatever it is, right? um and the less you focus on those things and how the characters interact with them very specific ways, and the more you focus on them doing the whole how do I become the best that there ever was, or like, oh, that guy's getting ahead of me, like that shit, that sort of moral conflict or sort of character conflict we've seen a billion times before. So again, I do think that this series struck a very good balance in that aspect, and more people should follow this example. So overall, I did enjoy the storytelling structure of Firefighter Daigo. I think it was very solid, and I do think that the sort of elements of its storytelling lined up to kind of entertain me quite well. And I also think again the audio visuals were also pretty solid. BGM, obviously, visuals by Brains Base, and the directing staff all lined up very well. So I'm quite satisfied by this. Um, it wasn't necessarily my cup of tea, but the way the story was told, the way it was set up, the way the anime was adapted, all really appealed to me quite well. So definitely a thumbs up for this. I did not expect at all to like this series coming in, and I'm surprised I did. So if
When
yeah.
is Ultraman showing up?
Yeah,
Series.
that's the real question, right?
When does this turn into what is that called? Like disaster crisis or whatever? When does it turn into that? Where you have
Disaster
to be a
report.
yeah, disaster report. Where you have to be a firefighter on the ground while Ultraman is fighting a giant monster. Okay.
It's gonna like in the middle of how we had the game for Protocol Rain or whatever, the game screen, when it's gonna turn into like the Firefighter Daigo is gonna transition into that one like firefighter arcade game. You know what I mean? Where it's like you have to go into the
Yeah.
fire.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's gonna just have that all 3D on the screen. But yeah, I really did enjoy how this series was kind of structured, and I would definitely give it at least a 7 out of 10 at least. It might increase. I don't know. I don't think there's a high chance that I would decrease the score as I watch more series or watch more episodes of this. It could definitely go up though. So 7, definitely a very solid series, even if it's not like, even if listening to firefighter trivia isn't your cup of tea. I do think it's just a good watch overall. It's a good romp for sure. So please do check it out when you have the time.